Sleepy exam prep. To Kill a Mockingbird. Hello and welcome. Get comfortable. Adjust your pillow, settle into your blankets, and let yourself relax. Tonight, we're going to walk slowly through Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird together, so that you can feel prepared for your exam or essay, even if you're listening with your eyes closed. Take a slow breath in and out. There's no pressure here, just gentle learning. This novel is set in the small, sleepy town of Maycomb, Alabama during the 1930s. It follows a young girl named Scout Finch as she grows up and begins to notice the injustice and prejudice that exist all around her. It's a story about childhood, about learning what's right and wrong, and about finding courage when the world feels unfair. As you relax deeper into your pillow, you'll hear the main plot, the important characters, the big themes, and some ideas you can use in an essay, all delivered in a quiet, gentle way. You don't need to memorize everything tonight. Just let the story wash over you, and what matters will stay with you. So close your eyes if you'd like. Let your breathing slow down. And let's begin our journey to Maycomb, Alabama. Picture a small southern town in the 1930s. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, where summer days stretch out long and lazy, and where nothing much seems to change from year to year. This is Maycomb, Alabama. A town trapped in old ways of thinking. In this town lives a young girl named Jean Louise Finch, though everyone calls her Scout. She lives with her older brother Jem and their father, Atticus Finch, who is a lawyer. Their mother died when Scout was very young, so a kind woman named Calpurnia helps raise them. She's their housekeeper, their cook, and really, a second mother to the children. Atticus is different from most fathers in Maycomb. He's older, quiet, thoughtful. He doesn't hunt or play football. Instead, he reads. He thinks. And he tries to live by a strong sense of what is right and fair, even when it's difficult. As you let your mind drift, imagine Scout's world at the beginning of the story. It's summer. School is out. And life is made up of simple childhood things, playing games, climbing trees, and creating adventures with her brother Jem and their friend Dill, who visits every summer from Mississippi. The biggest mystery in Scout's young life is their neighbor, Boo Radley. Arthur Radley is his real name, but the children call him Boo. He lives in the Radley house down the street, but nobody ever sees him. The children have heard stories that he's dangerous, that he watches them through the windows at night. The Radley house becomes both frightening and fascinating to them. They dare each other to touch the Radley gate. They invent games about Boo's life. They imagine what he looks like. The mystery of Boo Radley becomes their favorite pastime, a safe kind of fear that makes their summers more exciting. But as you rest here, comfortable and warm, notice how small these childhood worries are. A mysterious neighbor, a scary house. These are the concerns of children who don't yet understand real fear, real injustice. As Scout starts school and the seasons change, something else begins to happen in Maycomb. Something darker. Atticus is appointed to defend a black man named Tom Robinson, who has been accused of attacking a white woman, Mayella Ewell. The moment Atticus accepts this case, the atmosphere in the town begins to shift. People in Maycomb don't like that Atticus is actually trying to defend Tom Robinson properly. Most white lawyers in town would go through the motions, but not really fight for a black client. But Atticus is different. He believes Tom is innocent, and he's going to do everything he can to prove it. As the trial date gets closer, the children start to hear ugly words they don't fully understand. People say cruel things about their father. Some of Scout's classmates say their father is a traitor to his race. Scout gets into fights at school, defending her father's name without really understanding what the fight is about. One night, a group of men comes to the jail where Tom Robinson is being held. They want to hurt Tom, maybe even kill him. But Atticus sits outside the jail all night, reading his newspaper under a single light bulb, quietly protecting his client. Scout, Jem, and Dill secretly follow him and witness this tense moment. Scout, in her innocent way, recognizes one of the men in the mob, starts talking to him about his son, reminding him of his humanity. The mob dissolves. They go home. The children have just witnessed their father's quiet courage, though they don't fully understand it yet. Let your mind rest as we move through the trial scenes. You don't need to remember every detail, just the essential truth. The trial takes place in the hot summer courthouse. The black citizens of Maycomb have to sit in the balcony, separated from the white people below. Scout, Jem, and Dill watch from the colored balcony with Reverend Sykes and the black community. Tom Robinson takes the stand. He tells his story simply and honestly. Ewell had asked him to help her with chores around her house many times. Tom felt sorry for her because she seemed lonely, and her father was cruel. One day she tried to kiss him. Her father saw through the window and became enraged. To cover up what really happened, the Ewells accused Tom of attacking Mayella. The evidence is clear. Tom Robinson's left arm is completely useless, withered from a childhood accident. He couldn't possibly have beaten Mayella in the way she described. The bruises on Mayella's face were on the right side, suggesting a left-handed attacker. Bob Ewell, her father, is left-handed. Atticus gives a powerful closing statement, asking the jury to do their duty, to look past the color of Tom's skin and see the truth. He reminds them that all men are equal in the eyes of the law. But as you already know, as we all know, the jury finds Tom Robinson guilty. The children watch as the verdict is read. They can't believe it. The evidence was so clear. Tom was obviously innocent. But the jury, all white men, couldn't bring themselves to believe a black man's word over a white woman's, no matter what the evidence showed. As the black community leaves the courtroom, they all stand in respect as Atticus packs up his papers. Reverend Sykes tells Scout, "Stand up. Your father's passing. It's a moment of profound respect for a man who fought for justice, even though he lost." Take a slow breath. The trial is over, but the story isn't finished yet. Tom Robinson, losing hope after the guilty verdict, tries to escape from prison and is shot and killed. The tragedy deepens. An innocent man is dead because of racism and injustice. Most of Maycomb moves on quickly, but Bob Ewell, Mayella's father, is still angry. He feels that Atticus made a fool of him in court, revealing him as a liar and an abuser. He spits in Atticus's face one day in town. He tries to break into the judge's house. He's dangerous and unpredictable. On Halloween night, Scout and Jem are walking home from a school pageant. Scout is dressed in a ham costume for the play. It's dark. They're walking through the woods near their house. Suddenly, someone attacks them. Bob Ewell, drunk and full of rage, tries to hurt the children to get revenge on Atticus. Jem's arm is broken in the struggle. Scout, trapped in her ham costume, can't see what's happening. She hears grunting, fighting, someone breathing hard. And then Mysteriously, someone else is there. Someone rescues them. Someone carries the unconscious gem back to the house. As you rest here, comfortable and safe, imagine Scout's confusion as she stands in her bedroom and sees a pale, thin man standing in the corner. A man she's never really seen before, except in her imagination. Boo Radley, the mysterious neighbor, the monster from childhood stories, has been watching over them all along. He saved them. He killed Bob Ewell to protect them, and he carried Jem home. The sheriff, Heck Tate, makes a decision. Bob Ewell fell on his own knife, he says. That's what will be reported. Dragging Boo into the spotlight, making him a public hero, would be cruel. Boo is shy, terrified of attention. It would be like killing a mockingbird, Atticus agrees. Scout understands. She takes Boo's arm and walks him home, treating him with the gentleness and respect he deserves. She stands on his porch and looks out at the neighborhood, seeing it from his perspective for the first time. She sees all the events of the past years from his point of view, understands that he's been their silent guardian all along. Atticus tucks Scout into bed and reads to her until she falls asleep, just as you might be falling asleep now, the story settling into your mind like a familiar blanket. As you sink deeper into comfort, let's spend some time with the people who make this story meaningful. You don't need to write anything down right now. Just listen and let these characters become familiar to you. Scout is our narrator, our guide through this story. She's telling us about events that happened when she was between 6 and 9 years old. But she's telling the story looking back, with more understanding than she had as a child. As a little girl, Scout is fierce, curious, and honest. She wears overalls instead of dresses. She solves problems with her fists before she learns to solve them with her head. She asks uncomfortable questions that adults don't want to answer. What makes Scout special is her growth. She starts the novel seeing the world in black and white, good and bad, simple categories. By the end, she understands that people are complicated. She learns to practice empathy, to imagine what life is like for others. Standing on Boo Radley's porch at the end is the ultimate symbol of her growth. She's finally able to walk in someone else's shoes. Scout represents innocence, confronting reality. She's our eyes as we witness the destruction of childhood illusions and the complicated truth of the adult world. Let your breathing slow as we think about Atticus. He's the moral center of this novel, the person who shows us what integrity looks like, even when it's costly. Atticus is a single father, a lawyer, and a man of principle. He doesn't hunt, which makes him seem weak to some people in Maycomb. But when a rabid dog threatens the town, we learn that Atticus is actually the best shot in the county. He just chooses not to kill unless absolutely necessary. This reveals his character. He has power, but uses it sparingly and only for protection. His decision to defend Tom Robinson, knowing he'll lose, shows his courage. Real courage, he tells his children, isn't a man with a gun. It's knowing you're going to lose before you start. But you start anyway, and you see it through. Atticus teaches his children empathy. His most famous advice is that you can't really understand someone until you consider things from their point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. This lesson echoes throughout the entire novel. He's not perfect. He's blind to some of the women's experiences in town. He's perhaps too optimistic about the goodness in people. But he tries, every single day, to do what's right. That's what makes him heroic in a quiet, powerful way. Jem is Scout's older brother, and in some ways, his journey is even more painful than Scout's. He's older, so he understands more. He believes more deeply in the justice system, in fairness, in the idea that good will triumph. When Tom Robinson is found guilty despite the clear evidence, Jem is devastated. His faith in Maycomb, in humanity, is shattered. He can't understand how adults could be so blind, so cruel. Jem represents the loss of innocence more dramatically than Scout. He goes from a playful boy who dares to touch the Radley house to a thoughtful, troubled young man who's seen the worst of human nature. His broken arm, which he suffers during Bob Ewell's attack, is a physical symbol of how the events have broken something in him emotionally as well. But Jem also shows growth. He becomes protective of Scout. He starts to understand his father's courage. He's becoming the kind of man Atticus is raising him to be, even though the process is painful. Arthur Radley, called Boo by the children, is one of the most symbolic characters in the novel. For most of the story, he's more legend than person. He's the monster in the house, the subject of scary stories, the unknown figure that represents childhood fears. But slowly, quietly, Harper Lee reveals the truth about Boo. He leaves little gifts for the children in a tree knot: chewing gum, pennies, small carved soap figures. He mends Jem's torn pants and folds them on the fence. He puts a blanket around Scout's shoulders during a fire without her even noticing. He's been watching over them with love. Boo Radley is damaged by his cruel father and by the town's gossip. He's afraid of people because people have been cruel to him. But he's not dangerous. He's gentle, kind, and protective. Boo represents how we fear and misunderstand what we don't know. The children create a monster out of their imagination, but the reality is a lonely man who cares for them. In the end, Boo is a mockingbird himself, innocent, harmless, and hurt by the cruelty of others. When Scout finally sees him as a person and treats him with dignity, walking him home and understanding his perspective, she completes her moral education. Tom Robinson appears in the novel mainly during the trial, but his presence haunts the entire story. He's a hard-working man, married with children, who made the mistake of feeling sorry for a white woman in the 1930s South. Tom is polite, honest, and careful. He knows the danger he's in. When he admits on the stand that he felt sorry for Mayella Ewell, the prosecutor pounces on this. A black man feeling sorry for a white woman was seen as presumptuous, as stepping out of his place. Tom is a victim of the racist system. The evidence clearly shows his innocence, but evidence doesn't matter when prejudice is so deeply rooted. His death, shot while supposedly trying to escape, adds another layer of tragedy. Atticus notes that the jury's verdict was like a death sentence. And indeed it was. Tom Robinson is a mockingbird. He never harmed anyone. He only tried to help, and he was destroyed by evil. His story is the clearest example of the novel's theme of racial injustice. Take a moment to think about Calpurnia, who might be overlooked but is deeply important. She's the Finch family's housekeeper and cook, a black woman who essentially raises Scout and Jem after their mother's death. Calpurnia is wise, strict when needed, and loving. She teaches Scout to write. She disciplines the children when they're rude. She brings them to her church and shows them her community, helping them understand that people are people, regardless of skin color. Calpurnia lives between two worlds, the black community and the white Finch household. She even speaks differently in each setting, showing how she has to adapt to survive and thrive in a segregated society. She's a bridge of understanding for the children and a demonstration of dignity and intelligence that contradicts the racist assumptions of Maycomb society. Now, let your mind rest on the deeper meanings woven through this story. These are the ideas that make To Kill a Mockingbird more than just a story about a trial. These are the reasons teachers assign this book, the reasons it matters. Listen softly, and these concepts will settle into your understanding. The most obvious and powerful theme is racial injustice. The trial of Tom Robinson is the heart of this theme. Despite overwhelming evidence of his innocence, Tom is convicted because of the color of his skin. Harper Lee shows us how racism isn't just individual prejudice, it's systemic. It's baked into the legal system, into the social structure, into the way people think, without even questioning their assumptions. The all-white jury couldn't bring themselves to take a black man's word over a white woman's, no matter what the evidence showed. This wasn't just about one case. It was about an entire system designed to keep black people powerless. Atticus explains to his children that the courts are supposed to be the great leveler, where all people are equal. But in reality, prejudice infects even the courtroom. The novel asks us to see this clearly and to recognize that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. For your essay, you might write about how Lee uses the trial to expose the gap between American ideals of equality and the racist reality of the South in the 1930s. Tom Robinson's conviction, despite clear evidence, becomes a powerful symbol of systemic racism. Close your eyes and think about how Scout and Jem change from the beginning of the novel to the end. They start as children playing games, their biggest worry being the mysterious Boo Radley. They end having witnessed a terrible injustice, having been attacked, and having learned that the world is far more complicated and cruel than they imagined. Jem's reaction to the trial verdict is especially powerful. He weeps. He can't understand how the jury could ignore the evidence. His faith in fairness and justice is shattered. This is the moment his childhood truly ends. Scout's loss of innocence is more gradual, but just as significant. She learns that people she trusted, like her school teacher, can be hypocritical. She learns that nice neighbors can harbor racist beliefs. She learns that doing the right thing often means being unpopular. But the novel doesn't present this loss of innocence as purely negative. Scout and Jem gain something too: understanding, empathy, and moral courage. They become more aware, more thoughtful, more capable of making ethical choices. The title itself, To Kill a Mockingbird, relates to this theme. Atticus tells the children it's a sin to kill a mockingbird because mockingbirds don't do anything but sing for us. They represent innocence. When that innocence is destroyed by cruelty, prejudice, or violence, something precious is lost forever. Let your breathing slow as we explore perhaps the most gentle theme in the novel: empathy. Atticus's advice to Scout is the thesis statement for this theme. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. This idea appears again and again. Scout learns to understand Boo Radley only when she stands on his porch and sees the neighborhood from his perspective. She learns to have compassion for Mayella Ewell when she realizes how lonely and abused Mayella is. She even learns to tolerate her difficult teacher by trying to imagine her point of view. The novel suggests that many of the world's problems come from a failure of imagination and empathy. People fear and hate what they don't understand. They create monsters out of neighbors they've never met. They judge people without knowing their circumstances. The antidote to prejudice and cruelty is empathy. The willingness to imagine what life is like for someone else, especially someone different from you. For your essay, you could trace how Scout learns empathy throughout the novel, and how this learning process shapes her moral development. Rest your head and think about what courage means in this novel. It's not about physical bravery, though that appears too. It's about moral courage, doing what's right, even when it's hard, even when you'll lose, even when everyone is against you. Atticus embodies this courage. He defends Tom Robinson knowing he'll lose, knowing the town will turn against him, knowing his children will suffer for it. But he does it anyway, because it's the right thing to do. Atticus defines courage through the character of Mrs. Dubose, an elderly neighbor who's battling morphine addiction. He explains that real courage is when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. Mrs. Dubose knows she's dying, but she chooses to die free from her addiction. That's true courage. Boo Radley shows courage when he leaves his safe house to save the children, despite his fear of the outside world. Even Scout shows courage when she stands up to the mob outside the jail, though she doesn't realize how dangerous the situation is. The novel teaches that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting rightly despite fear. It's having principles and living by them, even when there's a cost. The title comes from something Atticus tells the children. It's a sin to kill a mockingbird. Miss Maudie explains that mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. They don't eat up people's gardens or nest in corn cribs. They just sing their hearts out for us. So who are the mockingbirds in this novel? Tom Robinson is a mockingbird. He's innocent, kind, and helpful. He never hurt anyone. He only tried to help Mayella Ewell because he felt sorry for her. And for that, he was destroyed by the racist justice system. Boo Radley is a mockingbird. He's gentle and protective, leaving gifts for the children and ultimately saving their lives. He never hurt anyone, but he was hurt by his father's cruelty and the town's gossip and fear. At the end, when the sheriff decides not to reveal that Boo killed Bob Ewell, he says that dragging Boo into the spotlight would be like shooting a mockingbird. The mockingbird represents innocent beings harmed by evil. It represents the vulnerable people in society who are hurt by prejudice, fear, and cruelty. It asks us to recognize and protect innocence rather than destroy it. For your essay, you could explore how Harper Lee develops this symbol through specific characters and events. The mad dog that Atticus shoots represents the disease of racism in Maycomb. It's rabid, irrational, and dangerous, and someone with courage has to stop it. The Radley house represents fear of the unknown, and how we create monsters out of what we don't understand. The camellia flowers that Mrs. Dubose gives Jem represent her courage and the complexity of people who can be both cruel and brave. Scout's ham costume represents innocence, and also how innocence can be both protective and blinding. Let these quotes settle into your memory. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. This is about empathy. I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. This redefines courage as moral strength. Mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. That's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. This introduces the central symbol. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. This is about moral integrity and standing alone when necessary. Atticus, he was real nice. Most people are, Scout, when you finally see them. This is about looking past prejudice to see people's humanity. Now, as you rest comfortably, let's talk about how you might write about this novel. You don't need to memorize these essay structures. Just listen, and you'll remember the shape of them when you need to. Imagine your essay question is, how does To Kill a Mockingbird explore the idea of moral courage? Let your mind form a gentle thesis. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee explores moral courage through Atticus Finch, Mrs. DuBose, and Boo Radley, showing that true bravery means doing what's right despite fear, pain, or social judgment. For your body paragraphs, you might think about: first, Atticus demonstrates moral courage by defending Tom Robinson. He knows he'll lose. He knows the town will turn against him and his family. But he believes in justice and equality. So he fights anyway. He gives everything he has to that defense, knowing it won't be enough because of the town's racism. His courage is quiet, but absolute. Second, Mrs. DuBose shows a different kind of courage. She's dying and addicted to morphine. She could die peacefully, staying on the drug. But she chooses to die free, to beat her addiction even though it causes her terrible pain. Atticus tells Jem that this is what real courage looks like. Knowing you're going to lose, but fighting anyway. Third, Boo Radley displays courage when he leaves his house to save the children from Bob Ewell. For someone terrified of the outside world, this is an act of tremendous bravery. He overcomes his fear to protect Scout and Jem. Your conclusion might reflect that Lee defines courage not as physical strength or violence, but as moral integrity in the face of difficulty. All three characters risk something important to do what's right. Let yourself imagine this question. In what ways does Scout's understanding of her community change from the beginning to the end of the novel? A gentle thesis might be: throughout To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout Finch evolves from a naive child who sees her community in simple terms to a more mature observer who recognizes both the deep prejudice and the unexpected kindness that exist in Maycomb. For your essay, you could explore: at the beginning, Scout's main concerns are childhood games, school troubles, and the mystery of Boo Radley. She sees people as simply good or bad. She doesn't understand the complexity of adult issues like racism or injustice. During the trial, Scout begins to see the prejudice that runs through Maycomb. She watches as her father presents clear evidence of Tom Robinson's innocence, yet the jury still convicts him. She sees neighbors she thought were decent reveal their racist beliefs. Her worldview becomes more complicated. By the end, Scout has learned to practice empathy, the lesson Atticus has been teaching her all along. When she stands on Boo Radley's porch and looks out at the neighborhood, she finally sees things from his perspective. She understands that he's been watching over them, that he's not a monster, but a protector. This moment shows her growth. She can now imagine other people's experiences and understand motivations beyond her initial impressions. You might conclude that Scout's journey mirrors the reader's journey. We move from simple judgments to complex understanding, learning that people and communities contain both prejudice and kindness, cruelty and courage. Breathe slowly and imagine this prompt. Discuss how the symbol of the mockingbird is developed throughout the novel. Your thesis might be, in To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee uses the mockingbird as a symbol of innocence destroyed by evil, developing this symbol through the characters of Tom Robinson and Boo Radley to show how prejudice and fear harm those who mean no harm to others. For this essay, think about. The mockingbird is introduced when Atticus tells the children it's a sin to kill one. Miss Maudie explains that mockingbirds only make music and never harm anyone. This establishes the mockingbird as a symbol of pure innocence. Tom Robinson is the clearest mockingbird in the novel. He's a kind man who only tried to help Mayella Ewell because he felt sorry for her. He never harmed anyone, yet he's destroyed by the racist justice system, convicted despite obvious innocence, and eventually killed. His death represents the sin of killing a mockingbird, destroying innocence through prejudice and cruelty. Boo Radley is another mockingbird. He's gentle and protective, leaving gifts for the children and ultimately saving their lives. He never hurt anyone, yet he's been hurt by his father's abuse and the town's cruel gossip. At the end, when the sheriff decides not to reveal that Boo killed Bob Ewell, he says it would be like killing a mockingbird to drag Boo into the public spotlight. This makes the symbol explicit. You might conclude that the mockingbird symbol represents Lee's central message: that harming innocent, vulnerable people through prejudice, fear, or cruelty is one of the greatest sins humans commit. Let your thoughts drift to this question. How does Harper Lee portray racial injustice in To Kill a Mockingbird? A thesis. Harper Lee portrays racial injustice as a systemic problem in Maycomb, showing through the trial of Tom Robinson that racism infects not just individuals, but the entire legal and social structure of the community. Your essay might discuss: the trial itself is the centerpiece. Lee presents overwhelming evidence of Tom's innocence: his disabled left arm, the location of Mayella's bruises, Bob Ewell's left-handedness, the lack of medical examination. Yet the all-white jury still convicts Tom. This shows that evidence doesn't matter when racial prejudice is so deeply rooted. Lee also shows everyday racism through characters' language and attitudes. The use of racial slurs, the segregated seating in the courtroom, the way white characters assume black people are less intelligent or less truthful. All of this creates a picture of a society built on racist assumptions. The novel also shows the courage required to stand against racism. Atticus faces hostility from his own community for defending Tom properly. His children are bullied at school. This reveals how racism is enforced not just through laws, but through social pressure and intimidation. You might conclude that Lee presents racism as a moral disease that corrupts the entire community, and that fighting it requires tremendous courage and moral clarity. One more prompt, softly. Why is Scout's childhood perspective important to the novel's themes? Your thesis might be: Harper Lee's use of Scout as a child narrator allows readers to see racism and injustice with fresh eyes, making the moral failures of Maycomb's adults more shocking and clear. Consider discussing how Scout's innocence means she asks questions adults have stopped asking. When she hears racial slurs, she doesn't understand why people use them. When she sees the trial verdict, she's genuinely confused because the evidence was so clear. Her innocent perspective strips away the rationalizations adults have developed for their prejudice. Also, Scout's growth throughout the novel parallels the reader's learning process. as she becomes more aware of injustice and more empathetic to others. Readers are guided through the same moral education. Finally, the child's perspective creates hope. If prejudice is learned, as the novel shows, then it can also be unlearned. Scout and Jem are being raised by Atticus to see people equally, to practice empathy, to stand up for what's right. This suggests that change is possible, one generation at a time. As you drift towards sleep now, let's review the essentials one more time, softly, so they'll stay with you. To Kill a Mockingbird is the story of Scout Finch growing up in Maycomb, Alabama, during the 1930s. It's about her father Atticus defending Tom Robinson, a black man falsely accused of attacking a white woman. It's about the trial that reveals the deep racism in the community. And it's about Scout's growing understanding of injustice, empathy, and moral courage. The characters you should remember: Scout, the narrator learning about the world's complexity; Atticus, the moral center showing quiet courage; Jem, losing his innocence as he witnesses injustice; Boo Radley, the misunderstood neighbor who turns out to be a protector; and Tom Robinson, the innocent man destroyed by racism. The themes that matter most: racial injustice and the failure of the legal system, the loss of innocence as children learn about prejudice, empathy and the importance of seeing things from another person's perspective, moral courage, the kind that means doing right even when you'll lose. The Mockingbird symbol represents innocence harmed by evil. Tom Robinson and Boo Radley are both mockingbirds, gentle beings hurt by cruelty and prejudice. Remember Atticus's advice? You can't understand someone until you climb into their skin and walk around in it. Remember his definition of courage: knowing you'll lose, but doing the right thing anyway. Remember Scout standing on Boo's porch, finally seeing the world from his point of view. If you remember these elements, you'll be ready for most exam questions or essays on this novel. Let yourself rest now. The story is with you. The themes are settled in your mind. You've done your studying for tonight, and you've done it well. Sleep well, and good luck with your exam or essay. You're going to do just fine.